Um,
Are you getting some sleep?
no, but no, and that's probably because Trump maybe watched one of your presentations on the escalation trap and decided to go by it point by point. It's like, all right, cool. What do I do next? Let me go to Professor Pep's escalation trap. I got it. Kuwait, we're going to launch missiles from your territory onto Iranian bridges.
Who would have thought a professor in Chicago nobody had ever really heard of before? I mean, who would have thought? Stranger things, I guess, have happened, Mario.
So where are we in that escalation trap? We've got infrastructure being struck in Kuwait and Iran. It stopped for 3 days now, but that's where it was last week before Iran made a threat to strike the airport and the ports in the UAE. And then since then, even despite American casualties, American attacks, not the intensity of them, but the targeting, I would say de-escalated. They stopped striking the infrastructure at least. But the Iranians seem worried that a ground operation is looking more and more likely. They keep talking about it. So we'd love to get your thoughts on where we are.
We are in a spiral phase of the escalation trap, Mario. And that phrase, that word spiral phrase, I'm using deliberately. That's different than simply a tit for tat. And actually, it was quite interesting. Yesterday morning, President Trump used that word spiral to describe the escalation. So that may be how he actually sees it. So what you have seen over the last 10 days is a spiral of escalation in two directions. You're seeing vertical spirals and you're seeing horizontal. And what you are seeing is a very complex, of course, situation unfolding. And more actors are coming in, and generally speaking, people are now saying, are things spinning out of control? Well, what you're seeing are spirals. And so these, there will be little spirals within the bigger spirals, but this is the spiraling phase of the escalation trap. And it is, people would like to have like micro predictions. Well, we've seen, for example, Iran hit 2 of Kuwait's 8 desalinization plants. Those are right literally on the coast. I did a post on this with a map on my escalation trap Substack so people could see exactly where they are and why the sea skimming cruise missiles, they just really have a direct shot at these. And it was actually quite a complex set of attacks because of the way the specific aim points on the plants were struck by different drones and missiles. So this is really showing a fair bit of very discrete discrimination, calibration on the part of Iran as it is targeting, and that's really quite significant. We don't know exactly where they're getting their targeting information from, and they have put out some statements like thanking locals, but that could be cover for thanking China and Russia. But the bottom line I'm trying to make is that you're seeing now. Real threats, real damage. And those 8 desalinization plants, you only need to knock out 2 or 3 of the big ones before literally millions of the 5 million people in Kuwait are going to run short of drinking water in 7 days. Now, how long it takes for them to really feel that pain is anybody. I don't know the full details, but it's not months and months. So this is really now getting in a quite serious. Now, it's true, as you said, that the targeting isn't like fully consistent on a day-by-day basis. So it's not like people often think, well, with escalation, it should be linear. Everything should always be moving up or moving down to a ceasefire. That's just not the way wars are. And we're in a war. We're not in a tit for tat. This is a spiral phase of this war. This war has been going on here 5 months. So and you and I have talked a lot of that time, and I keep saying this war is not over, and you want it to be over, and I would like you to be right here, but it's and that's what you're seeing. So what I would just say is that over the last couple of days, what the United States targeting has done is very heavily focused, almost exclusively on the tactical targets you would hit to prepare for a potential seizure of a ground objective on the coast of Iran, or that southern coast right above the Gulf of Oman. for a long time. I can't quite remember if you and I have talked about this. You've talked about it with some of your other folks. I've long said that looks like what they are setting the stage, so to speak, preparing the battlefield for. I'm not saying they're going to do it. All the reasons, you know, be very costly and ... That's all true here. But that's what the escalation trap comes in. So we all know the military risks of this are horrible. The real issues here are not the military analysis. The real issues are, why is he doing it? That's the escalation trap. You see what I mean? This is where my work is studying military action as it intersects with politics. And that helps to make sense of exactly the situation we're in right now, this moment.
But as this evolves, there's going to be new factors to add to the equation, and that might change the results. Has there been any new factors that you've seen in the last week or two that make you reconsider on whether this will escalate or not? Example,
well, when you say
munitions,
the results, so just unpack a little bit more. When you say this will affect the results.
Result as in this does not end soon, or this may eventually spiral as well.
Well, we can talk about what would happen if it ended soon. So I'm not expecting, I see nothing to indicate that this will end soon. But for example, if President Trump were, I see, for example, the current proposal by
munitions, maybe. Oh, sorry.
Munitions.
Munitions will be like one factor everyone talks about, that Trump cannot continue the war because some of the munitions, the long range ones, are getting depleted. They're at 50%.
This is not how the targeteers are thinking. I spent 3 years teaching conventional targeting strategy for the U.S. Air Force, with many war games of targeteers here. These are the easy issues here. Really? And now, just to be super clear, it's absolutely true. We're running through our Patriot missile interceptors, our THAAD. So the very specific interceptors of air defenses that are you've covered, many people have covered in detail, are absolutely right. Now, we don't know exactly what the arsenals are. Some people are asserting we had 1,500 of this, down to 1,800. Well, we'll see once we actually get the numbers in a few years what the numbers are. But they're probably in the ballpark. I'm not doubting that whatsoever. So that's not what I'm kind of pushing this a little bit to the side. So that's why President Trump, for example, thought it was a good idea, I'm pretty sure, or at least Pentagon did, CENTCOM did, to move some of our forces out of Bahrain. So we don't have our headquarters operating in Bahrain. The KAOC is not operating, at least as far as we know, in Ayudit Air Base. We think these are back here in the continental United States. I don't think we have this absolutely confirmed. I just want to be a little clearer about this. And also then moving forces to the base in Jordan to try to get them a bit out of harm's way. This is because of the vulnerability of those bases, and one of the reasons those bases are vulnerable to air, missile, and other attack is because we've used up a fair bit of our interceptors in defending Israel, for example. And where do we get them from? We get them from Asia. We get them from Europe. That's why Zelensky can't get them. So all of those details you've been covering. You're absolutely right on those details. Now, does that mean we can't bomb Iran? Whoa. Now, that's a different story. We just ran B-52s here from the continental United States in the last 24 hours to bomb Iran. Okay, those B-52s, we would like them to carry JDAMs. We'd like them to carry modern air-launched cruise missiles. However, those B-52s have been around since the Vietnam War era, actually a little bit before. These are like the 54 Chevy or 55 Chevy that just won't stop here, that are still operating in the United States places. Now they've been refitted and all that. But the bottom line is those things can drop dumb bombs and arc-like strikes and are well designed to do exactly that. Now, what that means is carrying on a B. You asked me these questions, Mario, and I have a hard time not giving you an actual answer.
I'm loving the details, because this is one of the things that a lot of guests mention, and I believe it as well, that the depleted munitions will be one of the key factors on why.
Well, let me just
cannot
explain.
continue the war.
Okay, let me just explain a little bit of the tactical, and then we'll get to the numbers of the depleted. So B-52s had multiple missions, nuclear missions, conventional missions, but they in Vietnam War were famously designed, and we did this in other wars, Desert Storm, to do what's called arc-like strikes, where 3 B-52s will fly together in a flight, and they will hit a kill box of 1 kilometer by 1.5 kilometers, and they will drop each of them their 80 500-pound bombs in this kill box, 240 500-pound bombs hitting that kill box to basically kill as many people as you possibly could in that kill box. That was without precision. There's no GPS for that. That was all designed before we had GPS, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, of course, we could use GPS. That would mean we could fly higher. There's lots of advantages to GPS. I'm not doubting that whatsoever. But I'm just trying to point out that if necessary, and I have been in discussions where this has come up. Okay, now I'm not going to go into that anymore. But if necessary, and I don't mean in this war, but if necessary, here you can bet that we are, rather than lose a war, we will do dumb bombs. Okay, and that doesn't mean that they're that we're going to be super accurate with them, but this idea that we're simply not going to fight a war because we don't have the absolute best precision you can. Now, second point, I did a paper on this, by the way, Mario. This was on first week in March on my escalation trap, because people have been arguing this from the first week of March. So if people go to my escalation trap Substack, they will find a 1,800-word paper describing all this. The second big point is not just we would be willing to use dumb bombs, but dumb bombs here are actually relatively easy to convert into at least a poor man's JDAM. That's a precision weapon here, because what a JDAM is, okay, or what these are, and again, I'm not saying that you wouldn't lose some capability by what I'm about to describe, but what you would do is you would just take backpacks with GPS and strap them to the bomb. And then you would take cords and you would connect the cords to the GPS here. There'd be mechanisms, of course, so the cords knew what they were doing, to the fins on the bombs. Literally, you would turn a 500-pound bomb into a PGM, a poor man's PGM, with about 20,000 bucks. Now, that's going to take a little bit of time. It's not going to be done. It's not going to take months. Okay. This would take a little bit of time, but if we're really scratching the bottom of the barrel here, this is the kind of stuff that we are going to do. And I'm just telling you, the idea that we would be out of 500-pound bombs or couldn't get them from, even if we were, this just not plausible. Okay, so somebody would have to literally show me that there is no place in the world where you can't get 10,000, 20,000, 40,000, 500-pound bombs here before I'm going to really believe, because I have just, I mean, this is what the targeteers, this is the easy part of the targeteering here. This is not, before I joined the Air Force, by the way, before I taught for the Air Force, I of course dealt with what we're talking about, the escalation trap. Where did I learn all this stuff from? I learned it from the years I taught for the Air Force, because I got briefings every single week from the best pilots, the best targeteers in the world in these war games here for years and years here. So I learned a lot about how bombs go on targets, how you load it. I mean, I learned a lot of doing that. It wasn't my job to teach them that. I'm focusing on the stuff you and I typically talk about, because that's what they would want from a professor like me, an actual civilian and so forth. But I'm just trying to explain. Before I started teaching for the Air Force, Mario, I thought, oh my God, this whole thing with the targeteering and how you fit up the exact bomb type to the right target, I thought this has all got to be super complicated, right? And then in the very first year when I taught at SAS, the School of Advanced Air Power Studies for the Air Force, we did our first war game here, and I was stunned. We had a several-day war game. And all that targeteering stuff, once those pilots got in the room and they did it, man, that was done in 45 minutes. That was not, the rest of the war game was all about the stuff you and I talk about. All this other stuff, it was just, it was child's play to them. This was not, this was like arithmetic compared to trigonometry.
Well, that's concerning, Professor, because that was one of the main factors that me and others have believed that this cannot escalate because the U.S. military just cannot afford it.
Well, the people on your show, I want to be clear, their points about running out of the interceptors, because I've listened to some, I've listened to all of your show. I mean, I've been on plane, Mario. I may have missed some of your stuff, okay? Because I've been on planes. I've been a little busy as this is heated up. So I probably have missed some of this stuff here.
But the interceptors. Can you tell me about the interceptors?
Yeah, the interceptors for the bases for Israel. The point I hear your guests talking about the most. They are right. I think they're either dead on the money or within the pickle barrel. They're right on that money. So I am not at all challenging that empirical element that we're running low on PAC-3s, we're running low on the THAADs, we're running low on the specific interceptors that we have built that are millions of dollars to shoot down incoming missiles, and we have used some of them against some of the Shahad 136 drones. So we are using those interceptors, and then now we're pulling them from Asia, we're pulling them from Europe. I don't think we're really run out of them here, but I think that's one of the reasons why and how does that affect the air campaign? Okay, how does that affect it? So that element is true. What that means is you're going to conduct more air operations from the continental United States. You're going to conduct more air operations if necessary, if we can get the okay from the European bases. You're going to run more air operations here if we could from some other areas. I wouldn't be surprised Incirlik would maybe start to come on the table here.
And the aircraft carriers as well.
Well, that's why the aircraft carriers, of course, are there. So they're backfilling. So what you are seeing, Mario, is air operations under the constraint of the lack of these interceptors, which is constraining but not stopping the air operations. And we haven't really ramped up what we can do with the B-52s and with the B-2s from these more longer range places here. So this is but that doesn't mean, just as accurate as all that is, Mario, and as real as that constraint is that I just defined for you, it is nonetheless a second order constraint. It is not a primary constraint to shut down the war. And that is what I think people are slipping. They're slipping. And I'm not saying your guests are doing that. I'm not even saying you're doing that, Mario, because again, I have to apologize for. I try to keep up with you, Mario, because you bring on some of the best guests in the world. And I'm just so honored that to be part of this once a week or so. And so it's but I'm just saying that I think it's a big leap. That's a mistaken leap to go from the constraint on intercepting incoming ballistic missiles and medium range drones to saying the war shuts down. That's not what I don't think we're in that situation. And I think if we are in that situation, we are months and months away from that situation, not days away.
So I've got two pieces of information that just came in that I think would help in answering the next question, which is expanding on what could happen next. So Trump is speaking with the Lebanese president. While he's speaking, a Jerusalem Post article came out saying that Trump has rejected the proposed 10-day ceasefire, according to the Jerusalem Post. The article also says that while the mediators proposed the idea to Trump, it was Iran that initially requested it. So that came out of the Jerusalem Post. Meanwhile, Trump is talking about the Houthi blockade on Saudi. She says that, he dismisses it as nothing significant. So now my question, and I know you're expanding what you were saying earlier, is just elaborate, because you kind of threw a spanner in the works when you mentioned the munition is easily dealt with, and oil prices
not
have dropped
easily.
significantly.
Again, I understand we want a light switch. Either something matters or it doesn't. A constraint is a medium.
It's not a deal breaker.
Not a deal breaker. That's what I'm telling you.
Is there any deal breakers?
Well, here's the trap in the escalation trap that is now at a very decisive point here, which is what you are seeing is, and President Trump, you just read, rejected so people have been saying, oh, he'll go back to the MOU and he'll do this and he'll do that in order to avoid the world's economy going off a cliff. I have been explaining here for days and days, I don't know, again, on you, is that I think what President Trump is looking out in front of him is the ship has already sailed on the impact on the world economy. I think he is already baking that in the cake. In other words, remember, it was literally 4 weeks ago. It was actually a little over 4 weeks ago, because it was June 17th when President Trump signed the MOU, and on that day said the reason he's doing it is because we are 4 weeks away from running out of oil. Well, what he was likely referring to is the March, I think it was March 17th, statement by the Treasury Department and the White House, which explained the release from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. And if your listeners will go to this mid-March statement, they will see that what President Trump's administration did is in the middle of March, they released 172 million barrels from the U.S. Strategic Oil Petroleum Reserve, and that was part of a 400 million barrel release from a total of 32 countries, and that would go over 120 days. Okay, that what happened around March 17th, I believe, is the date, but that's literally the numbers in the statement here by the official U.S. government here. I think what President Trump was referring to when he said we're going to be out of oil in 4 weeks is that release was coming to an end in those 4 weeks. Okay. And so that has happened. And the MOU did not open the Strait of Hormuz. Now, you can argue, oh, well, he then, given this, he should then give Iran anything, whatever it wants, blank check. Well, what a blank check means, Mario, just to be clear, is not just that Iran stops shooting. It means Iran gets to set fees in the Strait of Hormuz, fully control it. It also means that Iran could gain nuclear weapons, cross the threshold for nuclear weapons. Because literally, if we're just going to give Iran a blank check, that really is Iran becoming the regional hegemon and the fourth center of world power. So that's what that means, to give Iran a blank check. I just want to be clear. Now, if you don't want Iran to control Hormuz and the fees, and you don't want Iran for sure not to have a nuclear weapon, then you've got to stand up to Iran. That's what Trump is doing. And so that's where he is. Now, if he were not to stand up and stand down, let's literally say that he accepts what some of the folks around the world are saying, give Trump the blank check, just go back to the MOU, just basically give Iran anything. It's a blank check. What that means is President Trump's presidency will be de facto over on that day. Over. Now, it won't mean he will be out of office. I'm not saying he would be impeached. I'm not saying he would be removed. What I'm saying is that once he becomes totally the loser, the actual loser, nobody running for those midterms who's a Republican is going to want to have anything to do with that loser. Nothing. They're not going to be inviting Trump to come and they're not going to want a Trump endorsement. In fact, they're going to be hiding from Trump. And Trump will be the lamest of lame ducks, literally will have become Lyndon Johnson on that day, Mario. I don't mean he will maybe become it after the midterms. I don't mean he'll come some magic here. Now he still has tools. He can still do things with ICE. He just started to gave a speech last week where he's starting to plant the seed for a stolen election roadmap. Okay. So I'm not saying he doesn't have some coercive tools. But the idea, because remember, President Trump also did January 6th. Okay, we shouldn't forget about that. But I'm saying in terms of actually politics, anything like normal politics in the United States, here, this is really the trap in the escalation trap. So I think what you are seeing is President Trump is effectively putting politics over strategy. That's why all these discussions that people say, well, there's no chance this will work. There's no chance you take Charbahar. This is going to end in nothing like, it's going to be another, Card would be another Iwo Jima, or Keshem is bigger than Okinawa. These kind of discussions. Yeah. These are all excellent. Yeah. They're right on the money tactically. This is not even a doubt that they're right on the tactics, okay? But they're not mattering to Trump. And the reason they're not mattering is for the same reason the exact same analysis did not matter to Lyndon Johnson in the Vietnam War. So in the Vietnam War, we had a president in the United States. His name was Lyndon Johnson. And we now have the tapes, contemporaneous tapes in, say, March 1965, as he's escalating the war, literally those days, where he explains he's escalating even though he thinks it's not going to work. It's not going to work. Really? And this is, I sent you this, Mario, but I think you get so busy. I think you're on all the time here. I can understand, but I sent you the post I made on the escalation trap on Monday, which I think was yesterday. I've been on.
You sent it to me. You sent it to me on X, did you?
Well, I think I sent it to you on email.
WhatsApp. On email. Oh,
okay. And I also think I sent it to, is it Lisa, one of your people? But again, okay. It's these are 1,800 word posts. So I understand you guys are busy, and I try to highlight things in these posts. I did this on Plane on Sunday. And I'm giving you the actual quotes here from Lyndon Johnson. Okay, so I'm explaining to you these quotes. Now I can resend you these quotes, but you can also just Google them, have your staff Google the quotes. So we have tapes. Lyndon Johnson had tapes. You know how Nixon had tapes? So too did Johnson, and so too did President Kennedy. Well, these tapes are the actual words of the president here talking to different people. And we have those tapes, and there are articles, books about this. President Johnson did not go into the Vietnam War like, oh, is this a 50-50? What he was doing was he was going into the Vietnam War very much being advised and understanding that the military risks of failure were great. But what he saw was if he didn't do it, the political risk would be abrupt and immediate, whereas the military risk would happen over a period of months. And maybe there would be a way to pull a rabbit out of the hat. Because if something goes on over a period of months, there's always some chance. It's whenever we're talking about war, it's never inevitable. You're explaining all the complexities in war. Well, sometimes you get a break. You get a lucky break. You can't count on it, but sometimes you get that lucky break. And what Johnson saw was the political problem, and it wasn't the cynical thing that people think. And I've advised 4 White Houses from 2001 to 24, 4 West Wings, dozens of meetings. I think it's a mistake for people to think they're just all a bunch of cynical SOBs. Okay. Now, I'm not saying there's not a lot of that. I'm not defending anybody, but those are 2 Democratic, 2 Republican administrations. Okay. Including the first Trump administration. I'm not talked to this one. And if I did, I'm not sure I would be able to say, but the bottom line is, I think that what you see in senior political leaders, you see this with congressmen, senators, congressmen as well, is they tend to identify their political survival and role as indispensable to the national interest. They don't see these two things as at odds the way people criticize them Mario. What they see is, let me just talk about Lyndon Johnson, because we actually have the actual words here with Johnson. We don't have to make it up, okay? Lyndon Johnson thought that if he accepted surrender, and he literally says, if I accept surrender, okay, yeah, that's the escalation trap in so many words. He's saying those words. If I accept surrender, this will be the end of civil rights, that civil rights legislation in 1964 and 65. And it will be the end of his Great Society program, welfare, okay? And it's because he will lose or make more angry the Southern politicians who don't want those policies anyway. And so what he is doing as president of the United States is not just commander-in-chief fighting a war the way a general is or the way we've been talking. He was balancing what would this mean if his presidency, if he became impotent politically. And in his mind, what it would mean is the end of the domestic agenda of civil rights and the Great Society program. And that's why he thought those 58,000 were dying. He thought, I'm putting words in his mouth now. I'm not saying he said these words, but let me summarize it as the way Professor Pape would summarize it. For Lyndon Johnson, why are those 58,000 dying? I don't think he thought it was a mistake. He thought they were dying for civil rights and the Great Society. Now, he may have been wrong, Mario. We could debate him and his advisors. He would, you see discussion of this. And by the way, some of his advisors were much more optimistic about the Vietnam War than he was here. He was actually one of the most pessimistic, and the other advisors kind of caught on that he was right and they were wrong as time went on. But I'm just pointing out, Mario, you're asking, like, why is this happening? And it's the question then is, why would a president knowingly go into a war where now we've had, over the last weekend, 3 Americans, maybe a 4th, I'm told, die, and 100 wounded in the last 2 weeks? Why would he knowingly do this? And I'm trying to give you some real explanation of the actual issue here, as opposed to just saying, oh, he's just an idiot, he's not getting the information. We don't really, it'll be years before we get the documentary record on this, Mario. And we will undoubtedly debate this for decades. Okay. This is going to be one of those wars.
Just one thing. So the main factor at play is the political implications of the war. But yes, isn't the war negative, net negative politically? Higher gas prices, increasing the debt, American casualties, a war that most Americans are not supporting and find unnecessary. Aren't the economic impact of the war that I know is already there, but it could continue to get worse and much worse?
Yeah, so that means that the current opinion polls show that only about 30% of the U.S. public, it had been about 32%, support the war. But they're all MAGA, virtually all MAGA. What's at issue for Trump, as for Johnson, Johnson wasn't looking at the national opinion polls. He was a Democratic president worried about losing the Democratic political support from the South. That's what Johnson was. And remember, he was a black belt politician. He's focusing not on the opinion polls. He's focusing on what are the votes he needs from whom. That's what Lyndon Johnson was. He was that kind of a detailed guy. Well, what I'm telling you is that 30%, you look at that 30%, you say, oh my goodness, this must be, well, it is horrible. And it's going to create the worst election in our lifetime, by the way. This is going to end up being a really, probably the most dangerous election in our lifetime as well, that's coming up. But what I think people are missing is that 30%. He wants to keep the 30%, and if he does what the other 70% want to do, that 30% is not showing up for Trump. And what's going to happen is he'll lose control of MAGA, and that's the issue. The issue is, can he control MAGA? And what that means is only as a winner. If he becomes the loser, why is MAGA sticking with the loser. I thought, remember, these are Christians. They go to church. Okay. They're not really loving all these issues with Trump on his personal life. We have all the corruption. We got the Epstein files. Remember all that stuff over there? Okay. So there's a lot of reasons to throw Trump under the bus here. Okay. And if he becomes Yale and they can't do that 30% of the country, that's a lot of people. Okay, and that then Trump just becomes the lamest of lame ducks, and this basically the election of 2028 starts even before the midterms, and he's just not a player. He's just not a player. Okay, and that means his agenda, like deportations. So I'm not in favor of that. I'm not telling you I'm in favor of these things. I'm just trying to point out that if you want to deport 1 million a year. 1 million a year, that's what, or close to it. Okay, 600 or 700,000 a year. That's the current rate that we're trying to meet here. You need that political support here. And so that's what's at issue here, Mario. And I think this is what's being lost in the discussion. It's being discussed as a chess game. And what my work for 35 years has been about is how the military chess game interacts with the political chess games. That's what I do. That's what I do. So I'm not a former, bomber. I'm not a pilot. I don't do that. I'm also not just a diplomatic historian. That's what I discovered when I was doing my dissertation at the University of Chicago. Oh my God, I got all these books over here on how governments are making decisions and the diplomatic history. I got all these books over here on the military action. There's nobody there's no shelf in the middle. You see, and that's what I did. So I just sat in the Reagans. I just sat and I just got all these different books. And I figured out, well, how do they actually connect with each other? That's what the framework is of the escalation trap. And that's why it doesn't seem it's not like a perfect fit with many other people, because you have lots of people that are really, really insiders, like the reporters in the New York Times. Man, they get all the inside scoop inside of Washington. Okay. And then you got people that are real black belts on putting a bomb on a target. But where's the connection? That's really, and that's important, because that's what the real thing we are debating over the last few weeks is, my goodness, what's going on here? And if Trump, for example, really was crazy, why would all these people be, following him? What's really going on? So I'm trying to give you an explanation that really helps to explain. And then if you're going to, that's why this framework, I think, has been quite predictive month after month after month after month. It's because it's taking seriously both the military action issue and the politics, how they actually interact.
Interesting. Professor, I know you have to go, but I want to ask you, I want to try to, let you know what I understood from what you've explained. Make sure I got it right before you jump off, just because I want to bring it up with Joe.
I'll say a few more minutes. Mario, I'm madly trying to edit a piece in Foreign Affairs, and there's just no time.
So from what I understand, Professor, is that the political link between the war and the political ramifications of it, the way I looked at it is that the war is a net negative because of the polls, but looking at the national polls and the economic impact, etc. But the way you've described it is that, no, there's that 30 whatever percent that support the war, that have that perception of Trump being a winner. And that base, that die-hard base of Trump, if Trump gives up in the war with Iran, where it's obvious it's a loss, as in Iran gets a nuclear weapon, or in the short term, Iran charges a fee in the Strait of Hormuz, that image he's created over the years as being a winner that his voters really support him for, that is broken, and that ends up breaking his presidency and breaking all his policies, and he's conflated.
You have it exactly, Mario. And that's why what you have witnessed as these months have gone on have been occasional pauses where there have been ceasefires, and then everybody says, oh, the war is over, ... But it's been pauses in my framework and explanation, because that has been this has always been the case for months and months. And what you see by President Trump is he's trying to find all these off-ramps to this dilemma, this political trap of the escalation trap, as I'm explaining it now. And so what you end up with is After the regime change bombing, he tried the 6-week bombing campaign. Well, that failed. He tried the 2-month economic blockade. That failed. Then he tried the MOU. That failed because it didn't. He couldn't own the law.
They didn't give him an off-ramp. They didn't give him a political win.
He needed cover. And what happened, and in fact, I think you can literally date when President Trump may have lost faith in the MOU, because I don't know if you recall, but the Saturday after the MOU was signed, the president of Iran gave a speech. It was a Saturday, and President Trump commented on it. I'm not sure it was on Truth Social or it was in the media. I think it might have been both. But he commented on it, and he said, that Iranian president better watch his words. Well, what the Iranian president was doing was driving it home. This was the loss. Okay.
Yeah.
And this was the loss. Okay. And those Iranians were not saying, oh, sure, President Trump, we're going to bring you some gifts. Would you like would you like something? How about an album or a picture with me so you can put it right next to you and Kim Jong-un? No, they didn't do this kind of dance that a lot of people have done around Trump. They went the other way around. And why I think the Iranians did that was because they want revenge. They want to sink President Trump's presidency. And you saw that with the millions, tens of millions who came pouring out. And I don't know if you showed it on your show, but there's all these placards of Trump in coffins and different buildings in these cities in Iran. I mean, I've been on these, oh my goodness gracious. So this idea that they were ever going to give Trump a face-saving way out, because don't you understand, you have to, this is Uncle Trump, we gotta handle Uncle Trump. No, that's not. This is not the Europeans. Okay, the Iranians are mad because we killed something like their supreme leader, his family, his wife, and 137 of their leaders. That's like killing our president, first lady, members of the first family, most of the cabinet, a third of the members of Congress. Okay, and then we killed 4,000, something like 4,000 Iranians overall. And given the size of Iran, that's like 3 9/11s. So these are the reasons why the nationalism here. And this is why I've also been explaining this would work against the getting out of the trap, because these events make it almost impossible for Iran to give Trump a face-saving way out. So that's why this trap is so difficult. You see, and I think President Trump, he may pause. I can't tell you, he won't do a pause this week. I'm not telling you I'm not doing poly market. I'm talking about the stages here. And we are in this trap through the midterms for sure. This may go on through early 2027, Mario. And we'll see where this ultimately ends up. This may be truly the forever war. It hasn't quite crossed the forever war threshold in my model yet here, but that's where we are heading in that direction. And these are the reasons. And it's not because President Trump hasn't been informed about running out of oil. I mean, we just listen to what he says. He's saying what he's been briefed on. Okay. And we also have background from the New York Times about when the briefers from his Department of Energy briefed him on the oil situation. I mean, so we have additional supporting information to understand a little bit about what's going on in his administration.
Interesting. As you wrap up, you remind me of a post I did in April 6th. So that was
just before the ceasefire. Just before
the ceasefire. Yeah. So for me,
ceasefire is April 8th. Just for your listeners to know, ceasefire is April 8th.
So for me, when he was making those crazy threats, it looked pretty clear to me Trump was trying to off-ramp. And I made this post says, if the Iranian regime does not accept Trump's off-ramp, as in give him a political win, they shift from being the victim to becoming the aggressor. Now, you can see Ian Carroll misunderstood me and criticized me for being a Zionist. But what I meant by this is that Trump wants to get out of this war. He wants to get out of this war, but the only way he would be able to get out of it is if the Iranians give him something, not something of substance, but something he can go back home and say, hey, I won. And
to MAGA. Yeah, to MAGA.
Exactly.
The rest of the country, the Democrats don't have to believe it. And even most of the independents don't have to believe it. But MAGA, it has to be credible enough to MAGA, and it's just not true. I've been to, so I wrote this book, Mario, that's just coming out called Our Own Worst Enemies. 5 years of my life on research on why America's pulling itself apart inside. I call it an era of violent populism. In order, this is 5 years of research, okay, 6 days a week, okay, a lot of work here. I've been to Trump rallies. I've spent all weekend at Butler. This was the return to Butler, not the when he was shot, but the return. And these Trump rallies, you got to get there at 7 a.m. if you want to be within eyeshot of the Kamala Harris rallies. I'm sorry to say, you get there at 3:30, man, it's easy walking right into the 5 o'clock stage. It's not a problem. Trump is there. So I spent all weekend with these folks, and there's no chairs, there's no water. There's no bathroom breaks. That's why hundreds of them would fall over, and they had the EMTs to cart these folks off. Okay, and they were proud to do this. And so I'm talking to them. I'm surveying them. I'm doing field research. I did 4 of these Trump rallies, and so I learned a fair bit about what's going on here. And I'm just telling you, they are impressed. Number one, that he's willing to put his life on the line as they see it for the country. And number two, that he's a winner, He will find a way to pull the rabbit out of the hat. And if you listen to some of the people that, who have left the administration, they will tell you, those that are still in there, they just are so mesmerized by Trump that he can win. He can win. And it's because how many presidents could have come back from January 6th? I mean, think about this. He does January 6th and he wins legitimately. That's stunning. Okay. And we're just going to dismiss all of these, this idea that MAGA believes in him as a winner and just kind of, no, we're just going to now move that away. Because I think this is where it's really difficult, because I have spent my life trying to get to the empirical rock bottom of things. And I went to China a year ago in June because I wanted to see the advanced industries on the shop floor myself. And it's because the media is not covering it. So there's lots of topics here. I go as many places as I can go. Okay. And this is just, so I don't, even though you and I only talk about here from the computer, here, this is just not, I try to actually, and that's because it really does matter to these issues we're describing. And I think now you're really seeing it. So now, will President Trump certainly cross the Rubicon to go over to stage 3 of the escalation trap? Is he going to take Jazz? I think it's more likely than not, by the way, in the coming weeks, but it's not a certainty. And does it mean if he doesn't do it, this is all good, we're over, we're back, the world is fine? No. Okay. What would make it the true owning of the L is if he withdraws all 50,000 troops from the Middle East. He withdraws the aircraft carriers. He moves them back into the Pacific, and he moves them back to the Atlantic. He takes all those naval forces out. Now we would come to a true end game of the escalation trap. But that would also, of course, mean Iran becomes a fourth center of world power.
Well explained. Very well explained. I've got a lot of questions. I'll keep them for our next.
Well, let's try to do it again. I'd be glad to do more here, and I really do. I just really appreciate it, but I better go.
Yeah, I know, Professor. Absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right, guys, we'll be live again with Lance Roberts to talk about the economic impact, chief investment strategist and market analyst, to talk about the economic impacts of what we're seeing right now. Trump is talking to the press as well while I was speaking to Professor Pape. So I'll go through his statements in 6 minutes when I'm live with Lance Roberts. See you then.